1985, American farmers thought they were making the smartest investment of their lives. They walked into dealerships and signed papers for brand new tractors loaded with cutting-edge electronics, climate-controlled cabs, and computer systems that promised to revolutionize farming. These weren't just machines. They were 20,000-pound symbols of progress. But within months, those same farmers were staring at repair bills that cost more than their annual income. And here's the kicker. Nearly 40 years later, many of those exact same tractors are still sitting in barns broken because farmers still can't afford to fix them. If you want to understand how American agriculture got trapped in a cycle it can't escape, smash that subscribe button right now because this story is absolutely wild. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. The early 1980s were brutal for American farmers. Interest rates shot up to nearly 20%, land values crashed, crop prices were in the toilet. Family farms that had survived the Great Depression were going under by the thousands. The farm crisis of the 1980s wasn't just an economic downturn. It was an extinction-level event for rural America. In this chaos, tractor companies saw an opportunity. They started pushing a narrative that would change everything. If you wanted to survive, you needed to get bigger, get more efficient, and get modern. You needed their new technology. So what made these 1985 tractors so special? Companies like John Deere, International Harvester, and Case were installing digital displays, electronic fuel injection, computerized monitoring systems, and sensors everywhere. These tractors could tell you fuel consumption in real time, soil conditions, engine diagnostics, everything. For farmers used to machines they could rebuild in their own shops with basic tools, this was like jumping from a flip phone to a smartphone overnight. The cabs had air conditioning, stereo systems, and ergonomic seats. Dealers promised these machines would pay for themselves in efficiency gains. They showed spreadsheets proving you'd save on fuel and labor. It all looked so good on paper. Here's what the salesman didn't mention. These tractors were fundamentally different from anything that came before. Previous generations of farm equipment were mechanical. If something broke, you could see it, touch it, and fix it. A busted hydraulic line, replace it. Worn out clutch, rebuild it. Farmers had been doing their own repairs for generations. It was part of the culture. But these new machines had proprietary computer systems. They had electronic modules that controlled everything from the transmission to the fuel injection. And when those systems failed, farmers discovered something terrifying: they weren't allowed to fix them. The manufacturers claimed the computer systems were too complex and too sensitive for anyone except certified dealership technicians. They controlled the diagnostic software. They controlled the repair manuals. They even controlled the tools needed to work on these machines. If your tractor broke down during harvest, the most critical 2 weeks of your entire year, you couldn't just fix it yourself. You had to call the dealership, wait for a technician to drive out, wait for them to diagnose the problem, then wait for parts to arrive. Each day of delay could mean tens of thousands of dollars in lost crops. Let's talk about what these repairs actually cost. A farmer in Iowa bought a top-of-the-line tractor in 1985 for about $60,000. That's roughly $170,000 in today's money. Within the first 3 years, he had the transmission control module fail twice. Each time, the dealership charged him $4,000 for the part and another $2,000 for labor and diagnostics. Then the electronic fuel injection system went bad. Another $6,000 bill. By year 5, he'd spent almost as much on repairs as he did on the original purchase. And remember, this was during a time when corn was selling for less than it cost to grow. But it gets worse. These weren't isolated incidents. Farmers across the country were experiencing the same problems. The early electronics weren't reliable. Circuit boards would fail, sensors would corrode, software would glitch, and every single failure meant another expensive trip to the dealership. Manufacturers had created a perfect captive market. They sold you the machine, then they became the only people who could keep it running. It was brilliant business strategy and absolutely devastating for farmers. Some farmers tried to fight back. They started sharing repair information in underground networks. Mechanics began reverse engineering the computer systems. A few brave souls even sued the manufacturers, arguing they had a right to repair equipment they owned. But the tractor companies had teams of lawyers and carefully worded warranties. If you tried to repair the electronics yourself or used a non-authorized mechanic, you voided the warranty. Even after the warranty expired, you still couldn't get access to the diagnostic software or technical documentation. The manufacturers claimed it was proprietary information protected by copyright and trade secret laws. The situation created a bizarre secondary market. Farmers who owned these expensive 1985-era tractors started buying older, simpler machines as backups. A farmer might have a $60,000 computerized tractor sitting in the barn waiting for parts while he planted his fields with a 1960 model he bought at auction for $3,000. The old tractor might burn more fuel and lack a comfortable cab, but it worked. And when it broke, he could fix it himself with basic tools and affordable parts. The cutting-edge technology had become a liability instead of an asset. By the late 1980s, the consequences were piling up. Farmers who'd taken on debt to buy these modern tractors found themselves trapped. They couldn't afford the repairs, but they also couldn't afford to replace the machines. Banks started foreclosing on farms at an alarming rate. The bankruptcy courts were full of farmers who'd done everything right according to the dealerships and the agricultural extension agents. They'd modernized, they'd invested in efficiency, and it had destroyed them financially. Rural communities that had existed for generations started to hollow out. The equipment dealers who'd sold these tractors started going under too, which made repairs even harder to get. Now here's where the story takes a turn that'll make your blood boil. You might think that after the disasters of the 1980s, manufacturers would have learned their lesson. Maybe they'd make machines more repairable. Maybe they'd give farmers access to diagnostic tools. But instead, they doubled down. Every new generation of tractors became more computerized, more proprietary, and more locked down. By the 2000s, tractors had dozens of electronic control units. Modern tractors have more lines of code than fighter jets, and the manufacturers have fought viciously against any attempt to give farmers the right to repair their own equipment. This brings us to why those 1985 tractors are still sitting in barns, broken and unfixable. The companies that made them have moved on. They don't support the old electronic systems anymore. The diagnostic software doesn't run on modern computers. The technicians who knew how to work on them have retired. Parts are no longer manufactured. Even if a farmer wanted to pay for dealership repair, it's often impossible. These machines are orphaned by their own complexity. A farmer might have a tractor with a perfectly good engine, transmission, and hydraulics, but it won't run because a single electronic module failed and that module hasn't been available for 20 years. The environmental impact of this is staggering. These tractors weigh 10 tons or more. They're made of steel, rubber, glass, and thousands of components. They were built to last decades mechanically, and many of them could still be working today. But instead, they're sitting idle or being scrapped because of failed electronics that represent maybe 1% of the total machine. It's planned obsolescence on a massive scale, and it's not just wasteful. It forces farmers to keep buying new equipment, which means more debt, more financial pressure, and more vulnerability to the exact same repair trap. Some farmers have found creative workarounds. There's a growing movement of hackers and mechanics who specialize in bypassing tractor electronics. They'll remove the failed computer systems and retrofit older mechanical controls. They've created open-source diagnostic software by reverse engineering the proprietary systems. In some cases, they've even cracked the security on modern tractors to give farmers full access to their own machines. This is technically illegal under laws like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which makes it a crime to circumvent digital locks even on equipment you own. So farmers are literally becoming outlaws just to fix their own tractors. The tractor companies have responded by making their systems even harder to crack. Modern tractors phone home to the manufacturer. They have encrypted computer systems. Some models won't even start if the software detects unauthorized modifications. John Deere has argued in legal filings that farmers don't actually own their tractors. They own the physical machine, sure, but they only have a license to use the software that makes it run. And that license comes with restrictions. It's the same argument software companies use, except this isn't a phone or a laptop. It's a £100,000 piece of farm equipment that someone paid $300,000 to own. The political battle over this has been fierce. Right to repair legislation has been introduced in states across the country. Farmers have testified before legislatures explaining how they're held hostage by repair restrictions. Consumer advocates have joined the fight, pointing out that the same issues affect everything from smartphones to medical equipment. But manufacturers have lobbied hard against these bills. They claim that allowing independent repairs would threaten intellectual property, void safety standards, and even enable software piracy. In most states, they've successfully blocked right to repair laws. But there's been some progress. In 2021, after years of pressure, John Deere signed a memorandum of understanding promising to give farmers more access to repair tools and information. Skeptics pointed out that it was a voluntary agreement with no enforcement mechanism and full of loopholes, and they were right to be skeptical. Farmers report that while some diagnostic software is now available, it's expensive, limited, and still doesn't provide the full access that dealerships have. The playing field remains tilted heavily toward manufacturers. Meanwhile, the economic pressure on farmers keeps intensifying. Agriculture has consolidated dramatically since 1985. Small and medium farms have been swallowed up by large operations. The surviving farmers are running bigger acreages with tighter margins. They're more dependent than ever on technology and equipment, and they're more vulnerable than ever to repair costs and downtime. When a modern tractor breaks during planting or harvest, it can idle an entire crew and thousands of acres. The financial stakes are enormous, yet farmers still don't have the freedom to fix their own equipment or choose their own mechanics. Some interesting alternatives have started emerging. There's growing interest in older, simpler tractors. Machines from the 1970s and early 1980s, before widespread computerization, are selling for premium prices. Farmers value their reliability and repairability. Some companies have started manufacturing new small-scale tractors without complex electronics, targeting organic farmers and small operations. And there's been innovation in open-source farm equipment. Groups of engineers and farmers are designing tractors with open-source plans, off-the-shelf parts, and repairable designs. It's a tiny movement compared to the mainstream market, but it shows there's hunger for alternatives. The story of those 1985 tractors is really a story about control. It's about who gets to decide how we use the things we buy. It's about whether ownership means anything in an age when physical objects are controlled by software. And it's about power dynamics in an industry where manufacturers have systematically shifted risk and cost onto farmers while locking in profits for themselves. Those farmers who went bankrupt in the 1980s weren't failures. They were victims of a business model that treated them as captive customers rather than independent operators. Today, the same dynamics play out across the economy. Your car probably has repair restrictions. Your phone definitely does. Medical devices, wheelchairs, even farm irrigation systems are locked down with proprietary software and repair restrictions. What happened to farmers in 1985 was a preview of a much bigger transformation. And the reason those old tractors still sit in barns unfixed is a reminder of what we lose when we give up the right to repair the things we own. It's not just about tractors. It's about autonomy, sustainability, and whether we'll push back against a throwaway culture engineered for corporate profit. The farmers who experienced this crisis firsthand have become unlikely activists. They've testified before Congress. They've spoken at Right to Repair conferences. They've shared their stories with journalists and filmmakers. And their message is consistent. We need to fundamentally rethink how we approach ownership and control in the modern economy. These aren't anti-technology people. Many of them have embraced precision agriculture, GPS-guided planting, and data-driven farming practices. What they're pushing back against is the idea that using technology means surrendering your rights to a corporation forever. The repair movement has attracted support from some unexpected places. Environmental groups recognize that forcing people to throw away perfectly functional equipment is catastrophically wasteful. Right to Repair advocates have found common ground with disability rights organizations, who point out that people in wheelchairs or using medical devices often can't get repairs done because of manufacturer restrictions. Even security researchers have joined in, explaining that locked-down devices with proprietary software are actually less secure, not more, because vulnerabilities can't be patched quickly by independent technicians. The coalition supporting Right to Repair has become diverse and powerful. International perspectives offer interesting insights too. In some European countries, manufacturers are already required to provide spare parts and repair documentation for longer periods. Right to Repair laws have actually passed in multiple nations. The European Union has been moving toward mandatory repairability standards for electronics. They've recognized that consumer protection and environmental sustainability require giving people the ability to fix their own stuff. Meanwhile, in America, the tractor companies and other manufacturers continue to argue that repair restrictions protect their intellectual property and ensure safety standards. It's a clash of values that's playing out in legislatures and courtrooms across the country. The technological implications are worth considering too. As we integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning into farm equipment, the question of who controls the algorithms becomes even more critical. A modern tractor might use AI to optimize planting patterns, predict maintenance needs, and adjust in real time to soil and weather conditions. That's incredibly valuable technology. But if farmers don't have access to understand how those algorithms work or modify them for their specific circumstances, they're outsourcing fundamental decisions about their own farms to the manufacturer. It's a loss of autonomy that goes beyond just repair rights. It's about whose knowledge and judgment controls the farming operation. Some venture capitalists and entrepreneurs have spotted an opportunity in all this. There are startups working on tractor repair software, open-source farm equipment designs, and independent diagnostic tools. Some are focusing on retrofitting old tractors with modern electronics that are actually repairable and user-friendly. Others are developing modular tractor designs where components can be easily swapped out and repaired. There's real investment money flowing into right-to-repair businesses, which suggests that the market might ultimately solve some of these problems, even if legislation doesn't. Competition and consumer demand might eventually force manufacturers to loosen their grip. The generational aspect of this is also worth noting. Farmers in their 20s and 30s grew up with the internet and open source software. They don't see intellectual property restrictions the same way their parents do. They expect to be able to modify and repair their equipment, just like previous generations of farmers expected to be able to fix their tractors with basic tools. This is creating a cultural shift in agriculture. Young farmers are more likely to support right-to-repair movements. They're more likely to buy equipment from manufacturers who respect repair rights. They're more likely to gravitate toward open-source farm technology. That consumer pressure is real, and manufacturers are starting to notice. But let's be honest about the challenges here. Tractor companies are massive corporations with enormous resources. John Deere alone generates billions in annual revenue. They have teams of lawyers, lobbyists, and public relations professionals. They have relationships with politicians in agricultural states. They've built business models that depend on repair monopolies and planned obsolescence. They're not going to voluntarily give up those advantages. Real change will require sustained political pressure, litigation, and consumer activism. It will require new laws with actual enforcement mechanisms, not voluntary agreements with loopholes. It will require international coordination because these companies operate globally. The path forward probably involves multiple strategies happening simultaneously. Legislation needs to pass at state and federal levels explicitly protecting the right to repair. Patent and copyright laws need to be reformed to prevent manufacturers from using intellectual property law as a proxy for repair restrictions. Safety regulations need to be updated to recognize that locked-down devices are often less safe than repairable ones. Enforcement agencies need resources to actually pursue violations. And consumers need to vote with their wallets, supporting manufacturers who respect repair rights and avoiding those who don't. It's a multi-pronged approach, but the momentum is building. There's also a philosophical question lurking beneath all of this about what the future of manufacturing should look like. Do we want to move toward a circular economy where products are designed for durability and repairability and can be maintained indefinitely? Or do we accept a throwaway economy where everything is designed to fail and be replaced, generating constant consumption and waste? The environmental implications of these choices are massive. If we design things to last and be repaired, we use far fewer raw materials, generate less e-waste, consume less energy, and reduce our carbon footprint. If we embrace planned obsolescence and repair monopolies, we doom ourselves to an endless cycle of consumption and waste. It's not just about farming, it's about the kind of world we're building. The story of those 1985 tractors sitting broken in barns across America is ultimately a story about choices. Farmers made a choice or thought they did to modernize and invest in new technology. Manufacturers made a choice to lock that technology down and create repair monopolies. Governments made a choice to prioritize intellectual property over consumer rights. And consumers across the economy made a choice mostly because they didn't realize they had one to accept repair restrictions as inevitable. But choices can be changed. Right to repair is gaining momentum. Public opinion is shifting. Laws are starting to change. The future isn't written yet. What gives me hope is that this isn't just about tractors anymore. It's about a broader recognition that we need to fundamentally rethink our relationship with the stuff we own. It's about reclaiming autonomy, sustainability, and common sense in how we design and use technology. It's about rejecting the idea that corporations should have more control over our equipment than we do. It's about building an economy that works for people instead of just for manufacturers. And it's about remembering that the way things are isn't the way they have to be. We can demand better. We can build better. We can choose a different path. If you've made it this far, you understand why those 1985 tractors matter so much. They're not just machines sitting in barns. They're symbols of a much bigger struggle about power, ownership, and the future of our economy. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. We're diving deep into stories like this all the time, exploring how systems work and how they sometimes fail regular people. If you want notifications when we release new videos, smash that bell icon. And drop a comment down below telling me what you think about right to repair. Should farmers have the absolute right to fix their own equipment? Should consumers be able to repair the things they own? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.